Hello, everybody. My name is Anthony Kessel, and it's a privilege to have been asked by Terry Rubenstein to contribute to Light Through Loss. And I hope this recording is of help in some way to people who are watching. The first thing I'd say is that I don't consider my experiences particularly special. I'm not a relationship guru of any kind whatsoever. But the experiences have been in the relatively recent past. And obviously Terry felt that there was something in there that might be helpful for me to share. Just as a little personal background, I work as a doctor in the NHS and an author of children's detective books for middle grade. That's 11 to 16-year-olds. And I would also say on a personal note that my own experiences, the separation and divorce that I went through was not something I was looking for, having had what I think both of us would consider a very successful 20-year marriage. But it's something that came into my life and like everybody, required to try and navigate as best you can and learn from it. So what I'm really going to speak about today, I've got about 4 or 5 touch points that I'd like to go through. And the first point is that everyone's different. So we're all different as human beings, but everybody's separation, divorce, that breakup of a relationship is different, is depending on that context. So there's a recognition of that there's not a one solution for all, so to speak. But having said that, whilst everybody in every relationship is different, I am going to be talking about some of the commonalities to our human existence that we all share in going through any of life's challenges, including this particular life challenge. The commonalities being about the way that our mind works, being about the way that we are all connected to each other, or our essence. I'll come back to that later. We're all connected to each other, our place in the universe, and how we are as human beings. There are some commonalities that are important to both recognize and understand deeply, because they can be helpful to progressing through this difficult terrain. The second point that I wish to talk about was just about the notion of loss. And my experience is that the breakup of a relationship, it is a loss. It's a loss that has some threads similar to bereavement. Obviously, in the breakup of a relationship, the person or the other partner hasn't died. But in my own experiences, both my parents have died. My mother died over a decade ago. It was very sudden, and no one got a chance to say goodbye. And my father, more recently, a few years ago, and it was a different context. But in those circumstances, what I experienced in terms of loss and the grief, and the person not being in your life, that is a thread that one feels, or a lot of people feel, in relation to separation or divorce. There's a loss of that person from one's life. And that's something that I'll come back to talk about, and is something that one has to learn to live with as best one can. And the other aspect of loss is there is loss of I'll call it one's imagined future. And again, I know I've said this, I will be coming back to these things, but all we have really is the present moment. The past doesn't exist anymore, except in our memories. And the future doesn't exist anymore, but we tend to have in our minds imagined futures, what that future might look like. The growing old together with the person that you've made your life and relationship with, the being grandparents, looking after grandchildren together. There thoughts that we have in our minds about our future, but they are no more than that. They're no more than imagined futures. They're not real in any sense. None of us knows what the future holds. I don't know what's going to happen this afternoon, tomorrow. I can make some sensible plans, but I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody does. So there is a loss of one's imagined futures. And for some people, that can be particularly hard. But it's worth remembering they are just imagined futures. There's no one of us has a right to that future any more than anybody else. So the next point that I wanted to touch upon is there is no replacement for support. So if one's going through a relationship breakdown, a separation, divorce, or the like, the importance of support of close loved ones is vital. Now, it's not always easy. And a relationship breakdown, a separation, divorce can go on, often does, for some time. And it often involves very personal elements that one might feel uncomfortable about speaking to people about. But in practice and actuality, having one or two or three people who are close to you, who you're on your side, who you're able to talk to, is vitally important, whether that's a sibling or a close friend, or sometimes a psychologist, someone to talk to about your feelings of stress, anxiety, worry, low mood. And sometimes a GP, things are going, or another health professional, if things are going in the direction that one feels one needs that kind of help. So it's really important to recognize that in these times such as this, support, particularly of loved ones, is really, really vital to help you navigate the waves. And the other elements that it's in some ways is quite practical in the same way that no one really ever mentioned to me, but I will touch upon here, is there is a huge, and this is not so much on the psychological element, there's a huge administrative burden. I can't call it anything else than that is associated with a breakdown of a relationship, or divorce in particular. It requires a huge amount of time, not just all the time and the emotional energy, but a huge amount of administrative time. My own experiences were not a particularly complicated separation. My children, there were no custody issues. The children were adults, so it was simpler in that regard. But nevertheless, there's a huge amount of time spent on paperwork, admin, letters, checking, completing forms. And that's a drain. And that is a drain physically, but also a lot of that admin comes with emotional stresses and strains. So it's, if you like, doubly tiring. So I think there's an element of just watching out for that, being conscious. In some ways, I wish someone had mentioned that to me. I didn't realize. And pacing oneself accordingly. Sometimes you just don't have the energy to deal with a letter or a form. Do it gradually, doing it when you're feeling strong, do it when it's not interrupting something else in your day that's important to you, whatever that might be. And now I'll get on to, I suppose, what I think of as the deeper elements of what I wanted to share. And that's about divorce, separation, relationship breakdown being a life challenge. And one can either look at a life challenge, this or any other kind, as something that you can't understand. Why has this happened to me? Why have I been singled out? Why do the other people I look at seem to have life so easy? They haven't had this kind of challenge. What have I done wrong? Whatever that might be, looking at it as if something that you can't really understand why it's happened to you. To try to look at the life challenge differently in terms of, well, why wouldn't it happen to you? If 50%, 50% of people in this country are getting divorced at the moment, what's so special about you that you might not be one of those couples? There's nothing that makes any of us, I don't believe, immune to life's challenges. So why not you? And also, none of us experience life without challenges of some description, whether it's a work challenge, financial challenge, career challenge, children challenge, health challenge, challenges of death and bereavement. Nobody escapes. That's part of the nature of humanity. So challenges are always going to be there. They sometimes look like other people don't have as many challenges or the same degree of challenges. It's often easy to take that perspective, but I don't know, it's not really the case. Everyone experiences life challenges. And there is an element of accepting the life challenge as the greatest opportunity to learn and grow. And that is difficult when you're stuck in the turmoil and turbulence, tumultuous times that you can be going through with a relationship breakdown. But it doesn't mean, and that's not also the case, that the greatest opportunity for learning, self-learning, learning about the world comes through those challenges. And in some ways, if we didn't have life's challenges, what would happen? How would we learn and grow? How would we learn and grow in any significant way? So they're an important part of our human development and our development as individuals. I want to talk now just a little bit about how one navigates, or how one might be able to navigate the stresses and strains and the turbulence and difficulty around something as significant as a divorce or relationship breakdown. And I'm going to refer here to the innate health program and approach that is common to the charity that Terry and Brian Rubenstein set up, iHeart, and others in the well-being world. And it's broadly based on an understanding of how the mind works, which I'll try and sort of lead people through in a very simple way, because there are a few components of that I think have proven invaluable to me in the course of my own separation. And I said at the beginning that there's nothing particularly special about my experience. And that is true. But what I have benefited from is love and support of close family and friends, and 10 years immersed in this understanding of how the mind works, or our innate the nature of our innate well-being, that has proved incredibly helpful to me. So that's why I'd wish to share this. Now, the first sort of element of that understanding of innate health and well-being is about the relationships between our thoughts and our feelings. Now, it often appears to us that the external world is responsible for our feelings. In other words, if it's rainy outside, that's why I might feel sad today. Or if Arsenal have just won a game of football, that's why I might feel happy. There's something external, or if I'm my boss at work is causing me a lot of stress, if that might be the case, that's something people often talk about. There's something external is the cause of your inner feelings, of feeling both negative feelings of that's why I'm feeling stressed or anxious or sad or low today, depressed today, or your good feelings, I'm feeling positive and uplifted. But there's a direct relationship between your external circumstances and your feelings inside. That's how it appears to people, but that's not how the mind works. In actuality, it's impossible for something external, physically impossible. As I said, I work as a doctor, so science underpins my medical work, but it's physically impossible, as far as I'm aware, for something external, the rain out there, to put a feeling inside me. How does that happen? How can the rain do that? No, what is the case is that what happens outside is all mediated by the way we think about what's happening out there or outside. In other words, we live in the experience of our thinking, not a direct experience of the outside world. And that's why some days you could look at the rain out there, it could be raining out there, and you could be thinking, wow, isn't it incredible how the light is reflecting off the raindrop on the bonnet of the car? And I can just see the different angles of the flowers in the water on the car. It's amazing, it's beautiful. Or you could be feeling, depending on the way you're thinking about the rain, you could be thinking the converse. What a miserable grey day. I was planning on going for a run and now I can't. So that's why we intuitively know that it's probably not the case, but it appears to us like the external world is a response for our feelings. That when we give it a bit more thought, we realize, well, it actually probably can't be the case. Otherwise, wouldn't I always, when I encountered the boss at work, who I think is responsible for me feeling stressed, wouldn't I always feel stressed? But actually, sometimes I have a really good conversation with her or him. And many other examples. So the thoughts that we have are not a direct consequence of the outside world. The feelings that we have are not a direct consequence of the outside world. They are a reflection of the way we're thinking about those external circumstances at any given time. Now, why is that important in a relationship breakdown or a divorce? Well, it's because it is a time of great change and great external turmoil. You know, loss of imagined futures, as I said, but sadness, unhappiness, stress, difficulty, financial problems. And it can look very much to us like the other person or the external circumstance is on any given moment or day making me feel awful, stressed, low, in a state of turbulence. And those are the times when it's very, very easy for our thoughts to run away with us. I can't sleep because my mind is whirring around. But if your mind is whirring around with negative thoughts, then firstly, you will find it hard to sleep, but also you will feel awful. Because, as we've said before, it's our thinking that determines our feeling, and not any other way around. So what can one do about that? Well, there's something called thought recognition, which is about just being observant and recognizing, if you understand at a deeper level that your thinking is responsible for your feeling, it can be liberating from external circumstances. Oh, right, that other person who I thought was the cause of my irritation isn't actually the cause of my irritation. It's the way I think about that person. Well, therefore, if I can drop my thinking about that person or that circumstance or that externality, then, well, I'll feel differently. How can you change it's not a question of controlling, how can you notice and respond to that in the moment? Well, there's this thought recognition, which is noticing when you're recognizing when your thoughts are running away with themselves and giving yourself license to drop thoughts at that point in time. That's enormously helpful, coupled to the understanding of we live in the experience of our thinking. The other way, of course, is distraction. You can't constantly distract yourself one's whole life. But if one is finding you're in one of those moments where thoughts are whirring around, then a distraction, whether that be to read a book, whether that be to do some art, whether that be to go and play football, whether that be to talk to a friend. A distraction, if you take your mind, your thinking off the negative thoughts and the spirals that it's going in, and it's somewhere else, it's not a great surprise. You start to feel differently. So distraction, along with thought recognition and being able to understand at a deeper level the relationships between our thoughts and feelings, are incredibly helpful. The second aspect of just this sort of part of what I wanted to share is about living in the present moment. Because in the context of a relationship breakdown, or a divorce, it is very easy to get caught up in, I talked about it before, the past, which of course has gone, it doesn't exist anymore. It is very easy to get wrapped up in thoughts about the past. What happened? What did I miss? What went wrong? What did the two of us do wrong? And it's not that there can't be some learning from that, but getting completely enveloped, often in a negative way, about what's happened in the past is usually not very helpful. The future doesn't exist, as I've said. So what what one's left with, one will worry about your new future because the imagined future is gone. So it's natural to have a sense of, well, what does my future look like? What might my future look like? But again, that at a point when you're likely to feel low, that's probably not going to be very helpful because you're going to probably get quite anxious about it. I remember in the very early days, this has been now a few years, but in the very early days, amidst many other things that in some ways were much more significant things I was thinking about that I could be worried about. I remember saying one of the things was I ended up thinking, what am I going to do on a Saturday night? Now, and I ended up getting quite anxious about that, even panicked. And it was an odd thing, really, because in the big scheme of things, that wasn't the be all and end all. But it was obviously symbolic of something else about one's future, what you're expecting. But I remember getting quite caught up in that. And, the reality of when that time comes down the line is multifold. You don't know it at the time, but actually when you deal with it in the present moment, well, a Saturday night, well, firstly, you might not be alone on a Saturday night. You might meet somebody else and you're having a nice time with somebody else. You might be spending Saturday night with your children, or it might turn out with friends, meeting new people, or it turns out that actually having a Saturday night to yourself, watching Netflix or reading is perfectly nice, in fact, enjoyable. So the worry about something that doesn't really exist yet is unhelpful in the main. And we as human beings tend to be poor in dealing with uncertainty and change, and divorce and breakdown is real uncertainty and change. Our memories, our imaginations go a bit wild. So we get can easily get very, very worked up about those things, especially thinking about the future. One's more likely to draw and remember somebody else's separation that didn't go well and their future plummeted in some kind of way than remembering the person who was able to navigate and move on purposefully and meaningfully with their lives. So that leaves, if the past doesn't exist, the future doesn't exist, it just leaves the present moment. And the present moment is all that exists. And that gives you a different way to look at the challenge that you've been presented with, as in, this is what the present moment has put my way. I don't know why, but this is what I'm dealing with. But staying present focused is also incredibly it can be relaxing, because if you're focused on the present, you're not thinking about worries about the past or worries about the future. So if you're focused on the present moment, you can just deal with each thing as it comes along. But it also enables people to live meaningfully in the present moment, to engage with whatever you're doing and get to be the most immersed, the most absorbed, and contribute the most to others. So if you're living in the present, whether it's on a work call, not to be distracted, to be absorbed in that work call that you're doing in the present moment. If it's a conversation with a friend or a family member, not to be on your phone, not to be thinking about what else I'm doing, but just to be immersed in that present moment. If you're, writing a book, Just be writing that book at that moment. It keeps you absorbed in the only thing that does exist, the present moment. And there's and allows you to navigate what the present moment has brought to you with more grace. And I think of the quote by the extraordinary psychologist and teacher Eckhart Tolle, where he says, accept the present moment as if you had chosen it. Work with it, not against it. That alone will transform the experience of your whole life. Live in the present and accept the present moment as if you'd chosen it. That's difficult for us. Didn't really choose this, but accepting something as if you'd chosen it, because this is what has happened, can be quite transformational. And I'll just move on to the third aspect that I wanted to mention in relation to understanding of how the mind works and how where our psychological well-being sits. And that's to do with our innate well-being. It's something that is covered extensively in the I Heart, the Terry and Brian's charity that I referred to. Their programs for children, but also their programs for adults. Our innate well-being, our innate health. And that is that we are all we're all born with the essence of us. So we sometimes refer to this as our essence identity, who we really are deep down, not our form identity, what we look like, what our bodies look like, even our psychological identity that I might happen to be a father or work as a doctor. Those things are transient. They change. But our essence doesn't change. And people use different words to describe what your essence is. I like to think of it as the aliveness, because we can relate to that. There's something about being alive and aliveness that's a sort of weird thing. What is it? So something's alive versus something that's not. And historically, and in different spiritual circles, that's sometimes referred to as the energy of life. And people sometimes use the metaphor as the sun being literally the sun, but the energy of life coming from something like the sun. And the sun extends its beams all over the place. And those beams in this world, earth that we live on, land in particular places and particular living beings, all living beings, not just humans. And you, me, we all have inside us part of that sun, that energy of life. That's sometimes referred to as universal consciousness, the aliveness of the universe. And that's why people say and believe, and I certainly believe, that we're all connected, because we all have that aliveness. All living things have that aliveness within us. And that aliveness, if you like, that essence inside you, is the source of those innate qualities that are responsible for our innate well-being. What are those innate qualities? They are the capacity to love, to be compassionate, to be creative, resilience, warmth, tenderness. These are all things that we're born with and reside within us. We learn how to dislike and to hate, but we're born with those inherent properties or qualities within us. And there's a tranquility or peacefulness that comes with a sort of connection that you can get with your essence. And another wonderful writer and speaker on this is Rupert Spira. And he talks a lot about how do you connect with that essence more. And one does that through meditation sometimes. We can also do it quite simply by lying on the bed in a darkened space and allowing gradually your senses, your sight, by closing your eyes so you lose track of a vision, you can put something to stop listening to things, or have yourself in a quiet room, you can stop feeling things, and you can gradually, as you quieten down, stop thinking thoughts. And when all of those drop away, what are you left with? And what you're left with, what one's left with, certainly when I do this exercise, and I've seen it done in large groups of people, you're left with, lying there in that space, a awareness of being alive and some kind of connection with your deeper essence, which has nothing to do with you as your person, but some kind of feeling that you are there and that those capabilities, innate qualities, lie within that. And it's a very, very peaceful, contented place to be. And who wouldn't want to be in touch with those qualities, in touch with that essence, more in the day-to-day lives that we live, than you are not in touch with those? And actually, living in the present moment does enable you to be much more in touch with those innate qualities. And the other element of those innate qualities, which is so important, is that they don't have the capacity to be broken. So when one's going through something as potentially traumatic as a relationship breakdown or a divorce, there's a tendency to, or can be a tendency to really feel, oh my gosh, what's gonna, what's gonna happen? How am I ever going to meet anybody again? You lose touch with your innate qualities. But as one of my friends and mentors, Dickon Bettinger, once said to me, I think it was during that early period, that people often use the term, you feel heartbroken during such a time. But your heart, if you think of that not as your physical heart, but as your essence, it's not made of stuff that can be broken. In other words, your capacity to love, capacity to be resilient, to be, warm, to be tender, to be creative, all those human qualities, innate qualities, they don't go just because they don't disappear just because one's going through a challenging period. They're not able to be broken. They're not made of stuff that can be broken. And in fact, when all the external turbulence has settled down, and one's able to recalibrate, connect with those, one does have the capacity to love your friends, to love your family, to perhaps find a new relationship and love within that. Those don't disappear. What happens through a traumatic period is we lose touch with that. It looks to us like it might disappear. And I tend to find it helpful to think of it's a metaphor, an image of a flame inside. If the flame is your essence, the energy of life, a flame of a candle, think of it. It's burning in there. And during difficult times, that flame might diminish, but it doesn't go out. And you might lose sight of it because it's got smaller, or you can't see it or recognize it so easily. But it doesn't go out. It's always there, and it's always burning. And it's going to come to burn brighter at some point. And it can't be broken in that way. And it can't be put out even. Can't be put out probably even with death. So a remembrance of, an understanding of our innate well-being, where that comes from and how that's connected to our universal essence, if you like, is really, really, really helpful too. So I hope I'm gonna bring this to a conclusion now. I hope that's all of this has been helpful in some way. I'll return to the fact that a life challenge such as a breakdown or divorce is an incredible opportunity. That doesn't mean it's not difficult and tough at times. It is, of course, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. There always is, and there always is light inside. Thank you.